What if the most important signal in a celebrity's career isn't an announcement, but the absence of one? No press release. No dramatic farewell. No celebratory renewal. Just silence. And many are now asking the same quiet question. When a platform moves on without saying a word, what does that actually mean? Because right now, what's raising eyebrows isn't what Netflix said about Meghan Markle. It's what they didn't say at all. In an industry built on announcements, teasers, and carefully orchestrated reveals, the absence of news has become news itself. This isn't unique to one person or one deal. It's a phenomenon we've witnessed across the entertainment landscape, when major partnerships quietly fade from view, when expected continuations never materialize, when the next chapter simply doesn't arrive. What makes this particular case worth examining isn't scandal or controversy. It's the pattern it represents, one that tells us something fundamental about how modern media, celebrity, and audience expectations intersect in ways that would have been unthinkable even a decade ago. Let's start in the present, not the past. Scroll through Netflix's forward-looking slate for the coming year. Big budget projects, familiar faces, returning hits, new risks, but one name is noticeably missing. No lifestyle continuation. No follow-up project. No hint of what's next. And that absence has become the story, not because people expected fireworks, but because in Hollywood, silence is rarely accidental. The streaming landscape operates on momentum. Platforms announce their priorities months, sometimes years in advance. They tease upcoming seasons. They build anticipation. They create calendars that keep audiences engaged and subscribing. When something falls off that calendar without explanation, it creates a void, and voids invite interpretation. Here's what can be verified without speculation. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry signed a high-value production agreement with Netflix several years ago. Under that agreement, a limited number of projects were released, including a documentary series and a lifestyle-themed program. Netflix routinely publishes forward-facing slates highlighting priority content. The lifestyle series does not appear in the platform's highlighted plans moving forward. No official renewal announcement has been issued. That's it. No insider claims needed. No dramatic conclusions required. Just facts and a noticeable gap. Now, let's jump backward, not to rehash episodes or content, but to examine expectations. When the deal was first announced, it wasn't framed as modest or experimental. It was positioned as a major cultural partnership, a reinvention moment, a statement. The announcement itself generated global headlines. Industry observers positioned it as a turning point, not just for the individuals involved, but for what it represented: traditional celebrity meeting new media, royal heritage encountering American entrepreneurship, personal narrative becoming profitable content. Many believe this would be the beginning of a long-running creative chapter. The expectation wasn't a single project or two. It was a portfolio, a brand, a sustainable creative enterprise that would evolve over years. Trade publications speculated about potential projects. Media critics wondered what stories would be told. Audiences, whether supportive or skeptical, were at least curious. That level of anticipation creates its own pressure, because when the world is watching to see what happens next, nothing becomes its own kind of answer. So when something that was expected to evolve instead quietly pauses, people start connecting dots, even when no one tells them to. And that's where interpretation enters. Public response has split into three camps. Camp 1. The industry realists, those who see this as a normal industry cycle. They argue streaming platforms shift focus constantly. And not every project continues. Netflix alone has canceled dozens of shows that had devoted followings. Creative partnerships end. Priorities change. This is simply how the business works. From this perspective, reading anything deeper into the absence of announcement is projecting meaning where none exists. It's just business as usual in an industry known for volatility. Camp 2. The pragmatic observers, those who believe the lack of continuation, reflects lukewarm engagement rather than outright failure. This group sees the situation as neither disaster nor conspiracy, simply a case of a project not connecting strongly enough to justify expansion. Not every venture succeeds wildly, and not every failure fails spectacularly. Most outcomes land somewhere in the middle. They point to the reality that many celebrity-driven projects launch with fanfare but settle into modest performance. The absence of renewal doesn't necessarily mean anything was wrong, just that it wasn't compelling enough to be right. Camp 3. The pattern recognizer shows, who feel the silence confirms a broader loss of momentum. This perspective connects the streaming situation to a wider narrative. Product lines that haven't gained traction, public appearances that generate more questions than enthusiasm, brand extensions that seem to lack clear identity. They see the silence not as an isolated business decision but as confirmation of something larger, a struggle to translate fame into sustainable creative or commercial success. What's interesting is that all three groups are reacting to the same thing. Nothing.No statement.No defense.No victory. Lap. Just quiet. And here's where things get more complicated. Because in media, endings don't always look like cancellations. Sometimes they look like neglect. Sometimes they look like being politely left out of the room. Sometimes they look like a calendar that once had your name on it suddenly filling up with other people's projects. Many are now questioning whether the real issue wasn't controversy, criticism, or press, but clarity. Was the brand clearly defined? Was the audience clearly identified? Was the value proposition obvious to viewers who weren't already invested? Those are uncomfortable questions, but necessary ones. Think about successful content in today's media ecosystem. The projects that break through typically have crystalline clarity about what they are and who they're for. They don't try to be everything to everyone. They don't hedge their identity. A cooking show knows whether it's teaching technique or creating entertainment documentary, knows whether it's investigative journalism or personal narrative. A lifestyle program knows whether it's aspirational fantasy or accessible guidance. When audiences sense ambiguity, when they can't quite figure out what they're supposed to feel or why they should care, engagement becomes optional rather than essential. And in a landscape with infinite options, optional rarely wins. This raises a deeper question about modern celebrity. Is recognition the same as connection? Someone can be globally famous, their face recognizable, their story documented, their movements tracked, and still struggle to convert that recognition into loyal audience engagement. Because knowing who someone is doesn't mean you trust them, and trust is the currency that actually matters. Now, let's step away from streaming for a moment and talk about something else that's drawing attention. Consumer products. Because parallel to the streaming silence, reports have surfaced about large quantities of unsold lifestyle inventory connected to Meghan's brand extensions. What can be confirmed? Meghan Markle has been associated with lifestyle-branded products, including food items and home-related goods. These products were positioned as premium offerings. Some online reports claim large volumes remain unsold. What cannot be independently verified, exact quantities internal, sales data profit or loss figures warehouse. Totals. That distinction matters. We should be careful about accepting unverified warehouse claims as definitive proof of anything. The internet is full of narratives that sound specific enough to be true but lack the documentation to be verified. However, the existence of these reports, whether fully accurate or not, points to a perception problem that's worth examining. This next section is interpretation and speculation, not confirmed fact. Some analysts believe the issue may not be demand, but positioning. Premium products require either unquestioned expertise or emotional trust. Think about celebrity lifestyle brands that succeeded. Martha Stewart had decades of demonstrated expertise before her brand became a household name. Gwyneth Paltrow built Goop slowly, cultivating a specific community over years. Joanna Gaines emerged from a successful television show that proved her aesthetic sensibility. Week after week. Each had either proven mastery in their domain or cultivated such deep audience connection that trust was already established. And many are now wondering whether the audience was being asked to buy a lifestyle they didn't fully understand. Was it aspirational, relatable, symbolic, or was it caught in between? Premium pricing suggests exclusivity and expertise, but the messaging around accessibility and relatability suggests something more democratic and approachable. When those signals conflict, consumers get confused. And confused consumers don't open their wallets. They open a different browser tab. Let me ask you this, and be honest. When you see a celebrity lifestyle product, what makes you trust it? Is it the story? The consistency? The authenticity? Or do you just quietly scroll past? For most people, the answer is the latter. We're bombarded with celebrity brands daily. Unless something genuinely captures our attention or speaks to a specific need we have, we simply move on. The burden isn't on audiences to get it. The burden is on brands to make themselves unmissable. What's fascinating is how quickly competing narratives appeared. On one hand, online voices claiming the brand is struggling. On the other, unnamed sources suggesting everything is going perfectly. And that contrast alone raises eyebrows. Because when success is obvious, it usually doesn't need explaining. Think about genuinely successful launches. When a show becomes a cultural phenomenon, you don't need PR teams telling you it's popular. You see it in memes, conversations, and viewership numbers that platforms proudly announce. When a product line takes off, you see it in sellouts, waitlists, and organic social media buzz from actual customers. When success is real, the evidence creates its own narrative. But when you have dueling claims, some saying it's a disaster, others insisting it's brilliant, with no transparent data to settle the question, that ambiguity itself becomes telling. This isn't about rooting for or against anyone. It's about recognizing a pattern we've seen before, with actors, musicians, influencers, even entire networks. Attention is fragile. Momentum is perishable. And once an audience senses uncertainty, regaining trust becomes harder than launching in the first place. Zoom out even further. We're in a media era where viewers don't just consume. They evaluate. They compare sincerity. They test relatabily. They sense performance versus presence. This is perhaps the most subtle, but significant shift in modern celebrity culture. Audiences have become incredibly sophisticated at detecting what feels authentic versus what feels manufactured. Many are now questioning whether Meghan's projects were arriving at the wrong cultural moment, not too early, not too late, but misaligned. Consider the cultural temperature right now. Economic anxiety is real. People are questioning lifestyle excess. There's fatigue around celebrity culture that feels disconnected from ordinary experience. In this environment, projects that might have resonated a decade ago, glamorous, polished, carefully curated presentations of an enviable life, can feel tone-deaf. This doesn't make them inherently bad. It just makes them poorly timed. Cultural alignment matters enormously. The same content can succeed brilliantly in one moment and fall flat in another, not because of quality but because of context. Online, reactions range from sarcasm to disappointment to indifference. But indifference is the one creators fear most, because controversy still means engagement. Silence means the audience has moved on. Think about the life cycle of public interest. Controversy generates clicks, shares, debates. Even negative attention keeps someone in the conversation. But when audiences simply don't care enough to engage at all, that's the death of cultural relevance. Do you think silence is worse than criticism? Or is this just a pause before something bigger? There's historical precedent for both possibilities. Some celebrities step back, regroup, and return with projects that finally click. Others fade gradually from public consciousness, their moment having passed. What determines which path someone takes often comes down to self-awareness and adaptability. Can they accurately assess what went wrong? Can they adjust their approach rather than doubling down on what isn't working? Can they find the intersection between what they want to create and what audiences actually want to receive? Here's the part few are saying out loud: this moment may matter less for what it ends, and more for what it reveals. It reveals that celebrity alone no longer guarantees loyalty, that platforms prioritize performance over pedigree. That audiences want connection, not curation. The old model of celebrity was top-down. Famous people created content, and audiences consumed it. The relationship was one-directional. Today's model is fundamentally different. Audiences expect dialogue, not monologue. They expect to see themselves reflected, not just presented with an aspirational ideal they can never reach. They reward vulnerability over polish, consistency over perfection, substance over spectacle. This shift has caught many traditional celebrities off guard. The skills that made someone famous in one era, beauty, poise, careful image management, don't necessarily translate to influence in another. And influence is what actually drives modern media. Success. You can be famous without being influential. You can be recognized without being relevant. You can have a name everyone knows and still struggle to get anyone to care. Another revelation: streaming platforms operate with ruthless efficiency. They have access to data that tells them exactly how content performs. Not just how many people start watching, but how many finish, how many recommend it, how long they spend thinking about it before deciding not to watch. This data-driven approach means platforms can make cold, calculated decisions about what deserves investment and what doesn't. Traditional celebrity, awards, recognition, media coverage matters far less than the numbers that appear in internal dashboards. A celebrity might have every traditional marker of success and still fail to move the metrics that streaming platforms actually care about. This creates a fundamental power shift. Platforms hold the cards. They don't need celebrities as much as celebrities need them, and that changes negotiating dynamics. Creative control and whose vision ultimately prevails. Whether Meghan Markle re-emerges with a new project, a redefined brand, or something entirely different remains to be seen. The future could take several forms: the pivot, complete repositioning with a project that addresses the gaps in previous efforts, clearer identity, better cultural alignment, stronger value proposition, the doubling down, continuing in the same direction with the belief that the approach was right, but the execution or timing was off. The quiet exit, gradually stepping back from public-facing projects to focus on private ventures or philanthropic work away from media scrutiny. The reinvention. Moving into an entirely different domain where existing expectations don't apply and fresh credibility can be built. Each path has its own logic and its own risks. But one thing is clear. In today's media world, silence isn't empty. It's communicative. And right now, many are listening closely to what isn't being said. This story extends beyond any individual. It's a case study in how modern fame works and doesn't work. It demonstrates that recognition does not equal influence. Being famous doesn't guarantee the ability to move audiences or markets. Trust is earned, not assumed. Celebrity status doesn't automatically confer credibility in new domains. Clarity is crucial. Audiences need to understand what something is and why they should care. Quickly and intuitively. Cultural context matters. Even great content can fail if it arrives at the wrong moment or speaks to the wrong mood. Data drives decisions. Platforms make choices based on performance metrics, not traditional prestige. These lessons apply far beyond this particular situation. They're relevant to any celebrity launching a brand, any creator building an audience, any entrepreneur trying to convert attention into sustainable business. Perhaps the most significant insight is this: modern audiences are both more accessible and more discerning than ever before. Anyone can build an audience from scratch using social media and digital platforms. The barriers to entry have never been lower, but keeping that audience? Converting casual awareness into genuine loyalty? That's harder than it's ever been, because audiences have infinite options and decreasing patience. They'll give something a chance, but if it doesn't deliver immediate value or connection, they'll move on without guilt or hesitation. This creates an environment where early momentum matters enormously. First impressions crystallize quickly. Second chances are rare, and once an audience decides something isn't for them, changing that perception requires extraordinary effort. This story isn't finished. It's just quiet. And sometimes that's when the most interesting chapters are being written off camera. The silence we're witnessing might be a temporary lull before a strategic repositioning, a natural ending that simply hasn't been formally announced, a period of reflection and recalibration, or the slow fade that happens when all parties decide to quietly move on. We won't know which until we see what happens next, but what we can observe right now is the power of absence. In a world of constant noise, silence stands out. In an industry built on announcements, the lack of news becomes the news. And in the story of modern celebrity, the moments when nothing is said often reveal more than the moments when everything is. The question isn't whether this particular partnership succeeds or fails in conventional terms. The question is what it teaches us about the new rules of fame, influence, and audience connection in a media landscape that's still figuring itself out.